All right, music fans, welcome back. Harmless Dave here talking about very real music and doing it in real time for a few real people out there, just like you and just like me. Very real music. Nobody deserves to be in the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame more than the next guy I'm about to talk about. I complain a lot about who's in and who's not in the Hall of Fame. And this guy, pretty much more than anybody, should be in the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. Talking about the great J.J. Cale. Although a great many fans and fellow musicians alike were under the presumption that J.J. stood for Jean Jacques, that is not the case. He was born John Weldon Cale, and although he began his extensive career in Tulsa and is recognized as one of the architects of the Tulsa sound, he came into this world on December 5th, 1938 in Oklahoma City. What is the J.J. Cale sound, by the way? What is that? It's a little bit of everything. That's why it's so amazing. It wasn't until the mid-1960s that Elmer Valentine, co-founder of the iconic Sunset Strip clubs, Whiskey A Go-Go, the Roxy, and the Rainbow, suggested the JJ moniker. The recommendation was made so that people wouldn't confuse him with avant-garde rocker John Cale of the Velvet Underground. By the way, the Velvet Underground, they're in the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. Just throwing that in there. In addition, Valentine thought it would look good on the marquee at the Whiskey. Cale didn't start out to be a rock star. In fact, he shied away from public performances and the media for almost his whole life. And who can blame him, right? His first actual love was electronics and recording. He studied the principles of sound engineering while still attending Tulsa Central High School, building a recording studio in his parents' home. He furthered his knowledge of electronics while serving in the U.S. Air Force and got his first job in Los Angeles as a studio engineer. In his capacity as studio engineer, Cale recorded artists that included Freddie King and Bobby Blue Bland. Many of his own original recordings, including his demo of After Midnight in 1966, were done with electronic drum machines, providing the rhythm section since he wasn't making much money and couldn't afford session musicians. Speaking of After Midnight, Eric Clapton, who recorded it on his eponymous debut solo album in 1970, was turned on to the song by other Tulsa musicians. Well, let's backtrack a bit. It was Delaney Bramlett, the Mississippi-born blues rocker, that first introduced Clapton to the music of J.J. Cale while Clapton was working with Delaney and Bonnie and Friends. When Clapton went into the studio to record, Delaney, along with Tulsa musicians Carl Rattle and Leon Russell, were session musicians on the album. It was Rattle that played this particular song for Eric, and the decision was made on the spot to include it on the record. It was the runaway hit single from that project, scoring the number 4 position on the Billboard charts. And Cale had no idea Clapton had recorded it until he heard it on the radio, and the royalty checks began arriving. Of course, After Midnight and later Cocaine were both J.J. Cale originals, recorded and made famous by Clapton. Probably his most famous song was Call Me the Breeze, which he initially recorded in 1970 and released on his album Naturally in 1972. It became a Southern anthem when Lynyrd Skynyrd rocked it on their 1974 album Second Helping. Not too much influence here, huh? It's just they always talk about influence. This is a case study in influence, in case anybody cares. They go on to say, but that's just the tip of the proverbial iceberg. Other famed artists to record Cale's music include Jerry Garcia, of course, Nazareth, Johnny Cash, John Mayer, Kansas, Waylon Jennings, Dr. Hook, Poco, Beck, Santana, Widespread Panic, Johnny Rivers, Lucinda Williams, Maria Muldaur, Sissy Houston, Randy Crawford, The Band, George Thorogood, and dozens more. I mean, his name pops up all over the place when it comes to songwriting credits. Clapton once said of J.J. Cale, he has been misunderstood by most people, referring to him as a recluse when he's very sociable, open, and charismatic. He just prefers his own company. Just love that. Oh, in other words, he doesn't like a lot of people, and he likes the people he likes. That's kind of like my philosophy in life. I mean, especially in the age J.J. Cale, who died in 2013, I think. He would hate what's happening now with all the social media garbage. He would just hate that. So much so, in fact, that he never publicly claimed to be married to his longtime guitarist and muse, Christine Lakeland. So he was that much of a recluse that he basically hid his wife from the general public. Her first recorded appearance with Cale came on his 1979 album Five, although she had been a member of the touring band for 3 years prior to that. Being a rather cloistered artist herself, no confirmation was made of their actual relationship until the printing of his obituary. Wow. They lived for years in mobile homes and eventually on a secluded piece of property outside Escondido, California. Early in his touring career, supporting Black Oak, Arkansas, Cale's band opened for Quicksilver Messenger service at the warehouse in New Orleans. The night before, they had been booed and assaulted with bottles flung by the young crowd in Baton Rouge. Cale's response was to play the entire New Orleans show seated on a stool with his back to the crowd. Yeah. Famed blues rocker Tinsley Ellis was once fired from a gig because of J.J. Cale. Well, sort of. Ellis was just getting started in the music business, playing as part of a 70s hits-oriented supposed family act at Six Flags over Georgia. The story goes that the band broke into a spirited rendition of the Cale song Cocaine at the amusement park and were summarily dismissed from employment, even having to leave the park barefoot. According to Ellis, they fired us and confiscated our leisure suits and high-heeled boots. Well, maybe they just didn't like the concept of cocaine ringing out throughout the park. Of all the recognition his songs achieved over the years, Cale has not been included in the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame, the Blues Hall of Fame, nor the Country Music Hall of Fame. He was posthumously inducted into the Oklahoma Music Hall of Fame in 2014. Cale also received a Best Contemporary Blues Album Grammy Award in 2008 for his collaborative album with Eric Clapton, The Road to Escondido. The album remained in the box for the rest of his life. Cale said, "I put it on the mantle, but I probably won't." So the award itself never came out of the box. I mean, this guy, he wasn't looking for fame. He was just playing great music. My domestic duties are kind of slow. It didn't really change my life, except it was a nice pat on the back. Good for my ego. Man, I wish I had met this guy. Yeah, I mean, he probably would have been like, yeah, shut up, I don't want to talk to you, which makes sense. Cale's only hit song that he performed himself was in 1972, recorded in one take. The barefoot Jerry slide guitarist Mac Gaden Crazy Mama was actually the B-side of the single Magnolia. It was a DJ in Little Rock, Arkansas that flipped the record, loved the tune, and hammered it out onto the airwaves. In the old days, folks, you could do stuff like that. The song peaked at number 22 on the charts, making it his only top 40 hit, Crazy Mama. Cale was glad the flip side got the airplay. He considered Magnolia a slow, draggy-ass ballad. However, his fans loved it, and he ended up playing them both at every gig he played. Neil Young once said, "Of all the players I ever heard, it's got to be Hendrix and J.J. Cale, who are the best electric guitar players." Mark Knopfler also claimed Cale as an influence on his art, even participating in the 2014 tribute album The Breeze, in appreciation of J.J. Cale. Cale, though, didn't feel the same way about Knopfler. According to Gaden, Cale would rag on him, claiming the Brit ripped off both his guitar playing and singing styles. Apparently, burying the hatchet, however, JJ did eventually open for Knopfler on a U.S. tour. I love that. Not all of Cale's recordings were the relaxed dirt road sounding songs that caught the ears of generations of artists to follow. Hear that? Generations of artists to follow. In 1967, while trying to fit into the California scene of the times, he joined a band called the Leather Coated Minds at the insistence of producer Snuff Garrett. Their one venture was a trip down the Sunset Strip, which was mostly psychedelic covers of songs such as 8 Miles High. Isn't that already pretty psychedelic? Along Comes Mary, and even Puff the Magic Dragon. Although it did contain 4 original Cale instrumentals, Cale considered the entire project regrettable. In a 1999 interview with Max Bell, Cale admitted it was recorded under the influence of LSD and quite a bit of pot. I hate that album, Cale said. I've tried to burn it whenever I see one. We bought into the psychedelic scene, but it was a bad imitation. You guys might like it, but you're nuts. JJ Cale. Not only does he deserve to be in the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame, because obviously he was very humble, didn't want the fame. Eric Clapton told this story about how he and JJ were in a recording studio when Fleetwood Mac was recording, I think, Rumors, or it might have been the White Fleetwood Mac album, one of the two. And nobody really knew who J.J. Cale was. He's just hanging out there with Eric Clapton. And I think probably that's the way he wanted it. But those are the people that need to be acknowledged. They need to be recognized. And even in this little article, they talk about influenced generations. Generations of recording artists were influenced by J.J. Cale. That to me is the ultimate, sort of icing on the cake as to why J.J. Cale needs to be first on the list to go into the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. All of these artists looking for songs to put on their album. Let's go find a good J.J. Cale song since we ran out of ideas. We've got 9 songs. We need a 10th song. Let's dip into the J.J. Cale catalog. And, they might change the song up a little bit like Eric Clapton and Lynyrd Skynyrd did. And thus, you'll have a hit song or at least something to put on your album. So anyway, J.J. Cale needs to go into the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame before everyone else does. And I know it's 11, 12 years too late because he passed away in 2013, but he should go in there posthumously, and people should learn about J.J. Cale if they don't know about him already. All right, that's the video. Thanks for watching. Please subscribe to the channel. Hit the bell for notifications. We've got Patreon. We've got YouTube memberships. We've also got the great Buy Me a Coffee, where people have been sending me very nice messages overall. Apparently, if you're going to buy me a coffee, then you're going to send a nice message because you're spending money to do that. So I appreciate that. And it's good to hear from folks. So thank you very much. If you want to do the whole buy me a coffee thing, it's much appreciated. We need to start to talk about these people who are not in the Hall of Fame. I can't think of anyone more deserving than J.J. Cale.